You're listening to Between Two Bridges, a business-to-business podcast. With your hosts, Anthony R. Destiny, Joe Ferrani, and Jerry Kenna. Interviewing entrepreneurs, business operators, and investors. This episode of Between Two Bridges is sponsored by Pam Potts Payroll. Payday is the most important day to your most important people, and payday is made easy at www.payyourpeople.com.
We're here with another episode of Between Two Bridges. I'm your co-host, Anthony R. Destiny.
Joseph Ferranti.
And Jerry Kenna.
And the lady of the hour. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Pam Potts.
Pam, nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
We bring business owners on. I guess you're your own business, even though you may work for a company technically, but kind of a one-woman show, I would assume, right?
Yes.
So where'd you grow up? Let's get the backstory before we get into business life.
So I'm originally from Penn Hills, born and raised, and I recently moved to Cranberry Township.
All right.
We're starting to see a trend here. This is our third female guest.
All from Penn Hills?
Three out of four are all from Penn Hills. So women from Penn Hills are shaking and moving.
They breed them well here.
So how'd Penny Hills treat you growing up?
Pretty good. I learned a lot, and I feel like I learned a ton of life lessons.
All
and
right.
I wasn't always in real estate either, so I learned a lot from Penn Hills.
Yeah, so what were the interests in high school? Do you have siblings? How was that?
So I'm one of four. I have a twin sister, and I have two brothers. And growing up was just super, super fun. And what was your other question? I'm terrible.
How was it? What were you interested in high school? You said you weren't always in real estate. So what?
Basically, in high school, you're 18. They ask you, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And everybody says you got to get a good job. And for me, that was being a nurse.
Okay.
And I absolutely hated being a nurse. Nurses are special people, and I realized I'm not that special. So I had to kind of make a shift. I didn't want to be miserable the rest of my life, and always had a super big fascination and obsession with real estate. I was one of those people that loved playing on Zillow 24/7.
Oh.
And so I got my real estate license, and then my husband and I also started flipping houses as just like a fun little side hustle.
You did that first, or you got your license first?
We flipped a house first, then I got my license.
Okay. Let's date this a little bit. So when did you graduate high school?
I graduated high school in 2012.
Okay.
Graduated nursing school in 2015.
Okay.
Quit nursing very, very quickly. I got my real estate license in 2019, and we started flipping houses in 2018.
Oh, okay.
I always think the bedside manner would be better in that industry if people would just realize they don't want to be there, because it isn't for everybody. You know, I know quite a few people that have thought this is what I want to do, and then they get into it and then they're miserable.
Mm.
Oh, 100%.
Better to get out.
I found it really hard to want to help people that didn't want to help themselves. You cared more than I felt like they cared about themselves.
Yeah, like long-term nursing facilities and stuff like that, yeah.
Yep. But very happy in real estate.
So let's talk about that first flip, I guess. How did that come about? So we were those people that, you heard the radio ad about, hey, you want to flip houses? Come to our seminar. So we were those suckers. You went to a seminar.
We got into that.
Okay.
But we did learn a few little tips and tricks. We found our first house. We did a thing called driving for dollars.
Okay.
So basically we're driving around neighborhoods in Penn Hills, and you look for the worst looking house on the block. And we found that awful house, and we had a sticky note, and we ran it to the front door that said, hey, your house looks like it could use a little bit of work. Call us. We'd love to buy it. 2 days passed, and the seller called us and said, hey, we really want to sell it, and we don't know what to do with it. So that's kind of how we found our first house.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Was it the first house you did that to?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, we were pretty lucky. It was actually
one.
the neighborhood right behind where we lived. So it was like you could literally walk to the house from ours. So it was really cool.
Yeah, that's
very, very
perfect.
close.
That's perfect.
Not to get too personal, but how did you have the money to pull that off?
So, really funny story. I feel like we can own up to it. Me and John lied to everybody about flipping houses. Nobody knew when we first started.
Fake
we
it,
were
right?
so hush about it because I don't know, there's a lot of haters out there. And I feel like everybody and their, mothers are like, I'm going to flip houses.
Yeah.
But so we kept it really quiet. And we used, I guess the first house we used hard money. We used hard money to finance it, but you would just still bring 20% down. So I don't know. We owned our first house free and clear. So that was kind of our first little fixer-upper. Bought that one cash. And then we were just able to save a ton of money our first couple of years of marriage. So that's kind of how we got that house.
Yeah, the first one's the hardest one, right?
Yeah.
The first one taught us a lot.
Well, hopefully the first one's where you live. You don't want to be like under a bridge,
right?
Flipping houses.
For people not in the know, what is hard money exactly?
So hard money, it's not a bank. It's kind of almost like a private little lending fund. This guy has a holdings company and he charges a premium for his money. I think we paid, I can't remember. This was like 6 years ago, but I think we paid 14% and 1 point up front for the money. So you pay a lot for the money, and then the hard money lender also, they have their appraiser come and assess the property as well, and they like to pop in and check on you, which is not fun either. We learned very quickly that we had to part ways with private money, or hard money. Now we're into private money.
Terms aren't ideal.
No, too expensive.
Very.
Was he a part of driving for dollars, or did you meet this guy behind a gas station? Or?
We met him actually at a networking event. Our very first one we ever attended. That's where we met like our go-to title company, our lender. And then we kind of learned a bunch of skill sets from all the different networking events.
Okay, so you buy this house, flip it. What's the time frame on this project?
Ooh, this one. So
Did it go according to plan?
Gosh, no.
Like you see on TV?
No, this one was an interesting one. We bought it October of 2018. And then I think we officially sold it. It would have been August of 2019. So I was actually an agent by then.
Okay.
Which was nice.
You
I was
were
able to list it.
Yeah.
But I lied to my brokerage because they were like so anti-flippers. And I was like, oh, I don't know this flipper that, but it was my house. So it was kind of an interesting one.
So you didn't rent it out. You straight flipped that
Flipped
one.
it.
Okay.
I'm not the person to talk to about landlording.
Not going that route. Okay.
Did you make money on the first one?
We did. Not a lot, but we did. For buying a house at $18,000, you'd think you'd make a whole lot more. I can't remember what we made on that one. Probably like 20, and we thought we were rich, but the spread should have been way better.
But you got an education. So
yes, we learned so much.
$20,000 profit with an education is pretty.
Yeah, not too many people could say that.
Yeah, we learned a ton.
Come out in the green. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can happily say we flipped over 20 and we've never lost money, which is nice.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good stat. Knock on some wood.
Right?
Yeah. Was getting your real estate license part of the deal, or like how did that come into play? You just felt that was the next step?
Yes, because we wanted to continue flipping and it didn't make sense to pay out the commissions and then not get compensated on the backside as well.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why I got my license.
So
Very
2019, we're in the summer of 2019. Where do you go then?
Summer of
Buy
2019, we bought another one.
Okay.
We bought another one summer of 2019, and that one was still another long curve. That one took forever, and that one ended up bringing us into the pandemic. So that was
this Penn Hills again?
Yes.
Okay.
I swear almost
doubled down.
Probably like 16 out of our 23 have been Penn Hills. Penn Hills is our bread and butter.
Yeah. Good
That's where
area.
you're born and raised.
Yeah. But then, that house closed in the very beginning of the pandemic. So that was an interesting one because the world shut down.
Yeah, so that's March 2020.
Yep, you're doing closings in the back of truck beds. It was an interesting time.
Yeah, you have to walk down aisles a certain way to save lives.
Yep, it was an interesting one.
Yeah, every time we have someone on it, I guess it's our age, it's the world we live in. We always circled towards the pandemic at some point, and for good do.
How did the pandemic affect your flipping business?
Yeah, I loved the pandemic. I'm probably not the right person to say that, but I loved
We've
the
had a
pandemic.
few people say that.
Yeah.
I feel like our business soared, which was super nice. whenever they did like the mandate, you can't work or whatever. I mean, it was our house. So then like me and my husband worked instead of our contractors for a little bit. But I feel like we flourished in the pandemic. I feel like we went to a whole nother scale. We were then doing like 3 or 4 houses at a time instead of 1 at a time. We were able to help people out of more interesting situations. They wanted to get out of here. They didn't want their homes anymore. They wanted to live with their family instead of an assisted living. They needed to just dump their houses. So I definitely feel like we capitalized on the pandemic.
So when you said they wanted to get out of assisted living,
or no, they wanted to go to assisted living.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking like, you flipping multi-units here? Like, what are we doing? You never know. People that sit in these chairs, they have unique stories. So
tell us about your first, I guess, realtor deal. Were you the buying agent, selling agent?
I was the selling agent.
Are you nervous? Are you?
So it was actually a family friend. My whole business has been from family and friends.
Nice.
I've actually never paid for a lead, and I can proudly say that. And I've been in the business for 5 years. I've sold over 20 million, and it's all friends and family.
Okay.
Never paid for a lead.
Look at that.
But my very first one was one of my pastor's dad's house. He was moving in with them and then kind of transitioned into assisted living. But that was my very first listing, very first sale.
Okay.
So it was super exciting.
How'd that go?
It went really well.
Full asking, no issues. Inspection went well.
So you're back to 2019. Yeah. So definitely, I feel like there was probably seller's assist involved.
Yeah.
Probably full seller's assist. I feel like it probably sat on the market probably 2 months. As before the pandemic,
Stressful?
Everything did.
You're up every night?
I feel like it was a learning curve. I didn't 100% know what I was doing, but I had resources that could help.
How many times did you show it, you think? Just a couple?
I probably sat 3 or 4 open houses there, if I can remember correctly. Because again, before the pandemic, you had to work hard to try to sell a house. You had to work hard. But I don't know. I probably sat in an open house a handful of times, but I actually think we had 2 offers on it. I think it fell out one time, and then we went back on the market. This is a while ago. Yeah.
Were you with your current brokerage back then?
No, I was at a different brokerage. I was at my first brokerage for probably just about a year. So I've been at my current one for 4 years now.
Yeah, that's always like for people that have never gone through it, it's kind of like they think like, oh, you buy a house, like you buy produce, but totally different. So like our house in Oakmont, during the pandemic, we just let it sit because what were you going to do? You know what I mean? And then like afterwards, we had one, there was no open house. It was like the lady just kind of was like from 11 to 7 p.m. on Sunday, we're taking offers. And we had 9 offers.
When was that?
This was right outside of the pandemic, right when it opened back up, like 22.
I was going to say 2021 and 2022 were wild.
Yeah. And I was like, you're not going to plan an open house? She was like, well, I mean, if we have to. And then I get like an email of all these people that are like, we really love your house. And I'm like, everybody should be selling houses. This is the easiest fucking thing going. Let's try selling dry cleaning. But yeah, I mean, it was beneficial to us. I mean, we waited it out to like the perfect time. And we got $100,000 more than I thought we'd ever get out of that house.
That's awesome.
It's really set me up. So, I mean, timing's everything. So to get into flipping houses and then like just weather the storm, you got that experience now. So there's people now that want to get into it, and it's a little bit harder every day that goes by. It's going to be a little bit harder. Rates are up.
So that's a question. How has it changed since the pandemic's over? It's 2024. Rates are up. How have you seen the flipping side, not necessarily the agent side? We'll get to that. How's the flipping side changed?
I feel like the flipping side's definitely slowed down a lot. I feel like it's definitely varies price point to price point. So like right now we're sitting on a house, but it's a $400,000 house. Interest rates with that definitely aren't in your favor. But a couple weeks ago, I listed one of our flips. It was only $150,000 on the backside, and we had 33 showings in 24 hours, and we had like 10 offers. So I feel like it's still price point to price point, but I've definitely seen it's so much harder to find them now because everybody now just wants to list. Everybody thinks their house is worth more than it is.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like in the last year, I feel like flipping's definitely slowed down a lot. For us, at least, personally.
I think that I just talked to a guy, he's in the construction field, and he said that projects between the range of $10,000 and $20,000 normally were like his bread and butter that like just kept the bus going. And he said now that it's an election year, not that I'm an economics major or anything, but now that it's election year, the people that are doing the $1 million projects, they don't care. They're doing them. But people that have the $10,000 to $20,000 projects have slowed down. So he has more $1 million plus projects going on now with very little $10,000 to $20,000 projects. So I'm sure you see that in real estate too. You know, people that want to pay $150,000 for a house, they need a house.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's kind of my observation has always been, is because clients will ask me all the time, can I still, can you still make money flipping houses? Can you still make money investing? And a lot of people ask, like, what's going to happen with the market? And I've thought for years, like, just be in a place where you're an FHA, you're selling at FHA prices, because FHA people are going to buy regardless of the rates. So if you're in the 150 to 250 range, you're safe, you'll sell. And then the other side of that too is that in that range, you can theoretically turn it into a rental property and still be okay. $400,000 house becomes more challenging.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, P. Diddy couldn't even sell his ranch for $8 million or $11 million. He couldn't sell it, so he pulled it off the market. I mean, the feds might have had something to do with that, but it's definitely not on the market anymore.
How'd you get into Realty One Group? How'd that come about?
So I met Cameron Yockey, who owns our little franchise, Realty One Group Horizon. I met him November of 2018. I was almost halfway done with my real estate classes, and he told me he had this big endeavor he was gonna take on, and I was like, I don't know, like.
What was your first impression of him?
Oh, I love Cameron. I don't know. I was like this. He was like 18 when I met him.
Yeah.
And he was this 18-year-old. He was such a hard go-getter and a hustler. And he drove his BMW, and I thought he was so cool. And I was like, okay, I'm just really new to this. I'm going to try to, stick it out with one of the big name brokerages. And I stayed there for a year, and then I watched what he created, and I kept seeing what my splits were. And he was like, whenever you're ready, it's 100% here. And I was like, okay. And then I felt like I learned enough. I felt confident to kind of go out on my own. Yeah. And that's kind of how I got to Realty One Group. And I would never leave.
I kind of have a couple people that I think have gone that route too, where they end up there. It's it's a good, I mean, we had him on here. He has a vision. He's ahead of his time in it. And, wouldn't have changed much for you. You need that confidence to go into that environment, but he's killing it.
I felt like I had to learn before, and also he wasn't totally 100% with it, what his vision was. But I probably should have jumped sooner, but you can't go back. But I'm happy I made the jump when I did, at least.
I go back to that episode and I think about how people were worried about how to get into the flipping game, and this dude's trying to flip a whole school district.
Yeah,
he really is.
Soup to nuts, Some people just think different.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess talk about that business a little bit. It's commission based, so you're not getting a steady paycheck, right?
So that's definitely the downfall. That's one of my biggest annoyances with being, right? Yeah, it's awful being self-employed, and especially I'm a mom, and then having to pay health insurance out of pocket, or just the unknowns.
Yeah.
We own a couple different businesses, so it's definitely, I don't know, we have different streams of income, but it definitely really stinks being literally commission based. So it's never fun when people ask you to reduce your commission, because you're you have no clue how much money it goes out every month just to be a realtor.
Yeah. You pay licensing, right?
You pay so many fees. We could be here forever if I listed it all. But
what are the top ones?
I don't know. You have to pay so you have your brokerage fee that you owe every month. Okay. And ours ties in with our MLS dues. Mm-hmm. You have to pay for E&O insurance. You have to pay for, I don't know, on the backside, you have all your self-employment taxes. You have, again, as just an entrepreneur, I pay for health insurance out of pocket, which this country is definitely not affordable in that. So expensive. So you pay for all your marketing, you pay to be any sort of lead source you get, you pay for your websites, you pay for, I don't know, your cell phone to go off every 2 seconds. You pay for so much, your gas, your oil, your car. There's just a lot that goes into it that I don't think people realize how much money you actually spend to be an agent.
Well, then the other big part of it too is that I think that people lack the understanding that you don't get paid until the house closes. So as you're driving a buyer around looking at countless listings or showing a listing that you have to countless buyers or whatever, that's all free.
Yeah.
Until that house closes. And if that house closes, you don't get paid. So the people that are running you around all these different houses and then decide, we're going to wait. That was all for nothing. So, and then maybe in a year when they come back, maybe they call you, maybe they don't. But I think that's a big misunderstanding that people think that I don't think people have a firm understanding of the fact that you don't get paid until that house is actually sold.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
I had so many people last summer. They wanted to buy a house so bad before interest rates skyrocketed. Then they changed their mind. And it's like, I showed you 30 houses, put in 6 offers, and you get nothing. You don't get anything.
So my father-in-law's in commercial real estate, and he recommended when we were looking to buy, we had a real estate agent that showed us a bunch of houses every day, kind of communicating what was going on with, and like, she did a great job. I mean, like Saturdays at night, because like my availability as a business owner wasn't the best. We'd be like Saturday at 9 a.m., and she had grandkids, and she showed us a lot of houses and did a lot of work. And then when we bought a house off market, the first thing in my mind was like, when we're ready to sell, we're calling her and she can sell this property. But I'm not sure that everybody thinks like that. They're like,
no, absolutely not.
I don't know her anything, But
I have like a funny story with that one. My sister is my favorite worst client. When I first got my license,
Let's put her on full blast.
Oh, I will.
First name?
Kim. She knows.
Kim
She knows.
Potts.
So the first time I got, when I first got my license, she was my first client. She wanted to buy a townhouse and this, that, and the other. Then she bought one off market. Then, her and her husband wanted a bigger house, this, that, and the other, showed them a ton of houses, bought off market, kept the townhouse as a rental. So I've been cut out a lot. She's been my favorite worst client.
Kim, it's time to sell the townhouse, huh?
Right? I need some sort of income.
Yeah, it's because people will like paint the pretty picture, when they're looking to hire, they're always going to paint the pretty picture. But then when you get into you start to realize what goes into it, and you see it, and you see it, and now I've seen it, and it's like, I don't know, man. Like I've taken the class, like I've gotten 80% of the way done, but like you have to jump off a cliff and hope the parachute opens in that industry.
Yeah, it's tough. And I'm not an agent. My dad's an agent now with Realty One. So I've witnessed some of the stuff that he's learning and dealing with on different deals. And the other misconception is that like you show a house and then we made an offer and then you're done. And then you just get your commission. And there is so much more that happens to get from, okay, I'm going to buy this house to the closing table that nobody realizes, because when you have a good agent, they just handle it.
Right.
That's another misconception. That the money that you earn is definitely earned. There's no question about it.
It's another business where you need to trust the person too. You know what I mean? Like when you get a real estate agent that you can trust, then you feel secure, because like that offer is going to be delivered correctly. That everything, all the I's, where they dot the I's, cross the T's.
Yeah, and then
you need to do that, or else you could essentially get halfway there, and then it's just rejected because of something you screwed up, and then people lose their dream home.
Or wasn't sold correctly. I mean, there's certain, maybe the offer's under, and you have to be able to communicate that to the seller, like, hey, listen, this is where they're coming from, because the buyer is not really able to talk to the seller. So it has to be between the two agents. So that's a communication that the buyer and the seller are relying on you.
Yeah. It's definitely key to have two good agents on each side. Yeah. It really is.
And that's the whole thing. And I've had this conversation with a lot of clients that are on the buying side that will, mention to me, hey, I'm going to buy this property, or I want to go look at this property. And I'll say, have you talked to anybody yet? Well, no. Should I just call the listing agent? No. Find an agent, because, and this will parlay into the conversation we're going to have, the seller is going to pay the commission. They're going to pay the 6 or 7% that is split between the buyer agent and the selling agent. The seller's paying it. Bring your own agent that has your best interest at heart. because you don't know that seller agent. And that seller agent, their biggest priority is to get the house sold, not necessarily to get you the best deal. So bring your own agent to have your back. It's not going to cost you anything. Well, that's all going to change. Is it going to change? Is it still up in the air? Can you tell us what is going on so that we can have an actual conversation about what it means to the buyer? Because I think there's politicians and there's news media that is making it seem like this is a big win for the buyer. And I think, based on what I know, and you know more than I do, I think this is a huge loss for the buyer.
I agree. It is a huge loss. So what we're talking about is the National Association of Realtors, the lawsuit that we're all in. So basically every agent has to be associated to the National Association of Realtors. So they're in a big lawsuit. Basically, I feel like the sellers of America feel like they've been misrepresented as to how the commissions are being paid out. They feel like they weren't explained properly, that they were compensating the buyer's agent. So Pennsylvania, our listing contract flat out says how it is. So I feel like hopefully everybody local to this understands how the listing agreement looks like in our area. We basically, page 2 at the very top says what the commission will be, the whole commission, whether that's 5, 6, 7% plus whatever your administrative fee is through your brokerage. Then you drop down to the bottom and then there's a compensation cooperation, like addendum basically to it, that states about how you will compensate the buyer's agent. Typically, if you do the math, it's half of what that whole commission is. So for the most part, I feel like standard practice is you always divide half and half. So I guess starting effective in July, if the lawsuit does go through, buyers now are definitely at a little bit more of a disadvantage. And especially I feel like the media has put it out there that you don't need a real estate agent anymore, when that's super not true. So rules that are changing for us are we no longer now can list our compensation in our multi-list, which is a little goofy because that's just amongst agents. I don't understand why we can't do that, but that's the new rule. The second rule, and this is the one that I feel like's gonna affect the buyers a whole lot more, is to show any sort of home to any consumer, you have to have a buyer agency agreement signed. So basically, I, as the agent, now have to come to you as the new buyer and say, hey, there's a chance the seller might not offer a buyer agency compensation. And now we have to go through this. I mean, they've already kind of always been in place, but the seller's always basically taken care of it. And I think the media is going to throw this one for a little bit more of a curveball. But we have to basically approach our buyers and explain there's a chance you might have to owe us our commission.
On the back end.
Yes, which I think such a disadvantage to especially first-time home buyers who need the 6% seller's assist as it is, barely have the 3.5% down to buy a house, then to ask them to possibly pay a 3% commission. I don't see that being an advantage to the buyer at all. But I also truly believe that if listing your house and wanting to sell your house are two totally different things. So I'd hope that sellers would really see on the backside, if you want to sell your house, you're going to offer a buyer agency compensation.
So is that why they're not going to let them list it on the MLS so that you can't tell that they're not going to list it? They're
Correct.
not going to pay?
I guess they want us to now call the listing agents and ask, is there a compensation, to kind of then, like, before you'd even show your buyer, like, hey, they're not offering it. There's a chance you might owe X amount of money if you wanted to buy this house because we have this agreement in place.
So I like to say on here, I press the farts out of sheets for a living. So let's dumb this down for a second and explain it to like the normal person at home listening. What does this benefit, if it does benefit anyone? Who gains out of this whole? Because there's got to be someone. There's a reason they're doing this. There's got to be someone to gain something.
Out of the whole lawsuit or the whole compensation aspect? I feel like the lawsuit, there's some lawyers that are they're going to get a little bit richer.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a disadvantage to the seller if they don't really want to compensate a buyer agent, because your transaction can go so south so quickly if people aren't informed properly. There's so much that goes into a transaction that the average consumer doesn't know. So I feel like it's a disadvantage to the seller because their home could end up back on the market. So if they don't offer a compensation, that's their disadvantage. A buyer having to pay more is definitely a disadvantage whenever we are already in such an inflated society.
Yeah, they're already paying closing.
Yeah, and asking for another 3%. They don't have it. And I also feel like it's going to be interesting for agents if you have to ask your client, hey, do you have this in your bank account to pay me? Because you ultimately you can't finance somebody's commission. They can't, I feel like I don't think they can necessarily wrap that in the loan.
We could set up some credit card machines.
So I think that's an interesting one as well. Like, so I feel like the rapport as the agent that you build with your buyer, I feel like day one saying, hey, you could owe me this money. I feel like also that makes you look like a very interesting real estate agent. So
yeah, you kind of go to that first meeting and you're like, what's your budget? And then remember, I'm going to get 3%. So like if your budget's $100,000, you better have $3,000 sitting aside for me. And then it kind of makes that a muddy situation.
So definitely awkward.
Let's look at that because I'm a numbers guy. So so people have an idea of what that changes. Okay. So as of right now, somebody's selling a $300,000 house. Okay. The seller is going to pay 6%, say, okay, as of today's laws.
Yes.
To cover the commissions. Okay. Of which 9,000 is going to go to the selling agent and 9,000 is going to go to the buyer's agent.
Correct.
Now, keep in mind that most brokerages don't allow the agent to actually get all that 9,000. So most people are going to be like, $9,000 to sell a house. So most brokerages are going to split that in half.
Right.
Right. So now that agent is getting $4,500. Now you're at a brokerage you're fortunate enough that you get most of that. There's still a fee.
There's still a flat fee that comes out.
There's still a fee. You're still paying monthly brokerage fees. So you're not paying a percentage of every commission, but you're paying monthly broker fees. You're paying other things. So
that number shrinks really quickly.
It does. And what I want to make clear is that you're not, the 100% commission brokerages really only work really well if you have so much commission, if you hit a certain budget or a certain goal. If you're a low volume realtor, you're going to spend more in those monthly commissions than you would at a 50-50 split with somebody like a big brokerage. So, so let's just cut it in half. Okay. So now everybody's getting $4,500, but the seller paid $18,000 and the big brokerages are getting all the rest of that. Anyway, now on the buyer side of that, a $300,000 house with today's rules, they have to come up with what, 3.5% down?
Yep.
All right. So 300,000.
That's with impeccable credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 10,500 down plus closing costs, right?
I know. I usually add like, I'm so goofy. I usually say, so you owe roughly at least 1% in transfer tax. And then I usually say another 1% baloney fee for all the other fees and costs. And then probably at least another 0.5% just in lending.
So let's say 3%.
That's a good number to roll.
Okay. So that's another $9,000 in closing costs. Okay. So as of today's rules, you could buy a $300,000 house as a buyer for $19,500 down.
Yep.
Okay.
Not terrible.
Not terrible. Now all of a sudden, they need $28,500 to buy that same house. Down payment minimum.
Which is sad.
And if you're a seller,
and that's a minimum. That's an FHA buyer, because if you're a conventional buyer, you're not getting anything at 3.5% down. You're at 20%, right?
5.
5?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. But nevertheless, 28.5. Now that's almost 10% of that $300,000 house. So,
which is also, so then if you also think about veterans loans aren't allowed to compensate an agent whatsoever. So like a VA buyer, they don't pay like the administrative fees, like that all gets waived. And typically the seller usually pays for like their pest inspection and things like that. How are you a VA buyer now trying to buy a house when you actually can't ask your buyer's agent, like you can't compensate.
So you can't even.
So you have to ask that seller to pay if you're a VA buyer.
Wow.
So I feel like this whole thing really messes with veterans who I think deserve the world, and first-time home buyers who have, I don't want to say no money, but that's a lot for your first house. That's a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a $300,000 house, it's a 33% increase in what you have to come up with at the closing table because of this law change. I don't know.
But it's all in, and I hope that people will still, as listing agents, go to their sellers and say, hey, we have to compensate the buyer agent. Because if not, like, I think it's going to be a lot harder to sell houses. And I know I've listened to a couple of different webinars about this, and people are saying how, attorneys will now do it. Attorneys can't get in the houses. We pay for our e-key. So I don't understand.
Attorneys make more than real estate agents.
Yeah, last time I checked, I was in an attorney status. So I think
their hourglass is a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
You know, maybe
if
they
by the hour too, where you're at that 3%. So those 30 houses that you just walked somebody around to, try doing that at $350 an hour.
My goodness. I mean, I even think back to like 2021 and 2022 when like the market was at its peak. I would show clients like 60 houses, and every house they'd put an offer in, but they just couldn't get it accepted because there was always somebody waiving inspection. Somebody was all cash, 100,000 over. And, it's just, those were hard years. But
you guys did a really good job of explaining this. I still don't understand what the government's benefit is throwing their hat into this mix.
I don't think that it's necessarily a government thing. I think
it's a lawsuit that sparked all this.
I do. And I think that a lot of things that come from these lawsuits or from the government, they actually accomplish the exact opposite of their stated intent, where they think that they're helping
the buyer.
They're helping the buyer because they're not going to have to. I don't even know how they're going to help the buyer. I think they're thinking that it's going to be easier to sell a house because they're not going to. I don't know. I don't really understand. But there's no.
Well, to play devil's advocate.
What it's gonna end up happening is you're gonna have people that are gonna say, hey, I don't need an agent anymore to buy this house, and then they're gonna try to make this offer, but they're not gonna know how to make an offer because, well, what do? You have to fill out a contract.
Who's writing their contract?
Who's writing the contract? And then I don't know if you've looked at one because you're in the middle of a deal, but to look at a purchase agreement, a sale agreement, it's not cut and dry. I mean, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of things you have to be careful of. There's contingencies you have to be aware of. There's timelines for each contingency. There's so much.
Yeah, the wrong guy could bury you.
Well, and just, I mean, you could end up losing hand money. You could.
In addition to.
Yeah.
You could lose. I mean, they can make that number.
I think the thing is like, if you don't want to use a real estate agent, there is something called for sale by owner. And I feel like a lot of those usually end in a little bit of headaches. But I don't know. I still just hope that the listing agents out there still approach their sellers stating like, hey, this is kind of how our contracts have always been written out. At least in Pennsylvania, that's literally how they are. It's flat out says how they're being divvied up. So I would hope that they'd still pay for buyers.
A plumbing field. I know a guy my brother actually went to plumbing school, and his teacher told him, he said, it's as simple as this. Someone dies, there's a code. And then someone dies, there's a code. So I think with the lawsuits, kind of what's stemming this is like they're trying to protect everybody, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
Government fucks everything up. Let's just be out in front with it.
Do you think that it's going to go through, or do you think that at the last minute they're going to say, hey, this is not going to work?
I definitely think it's going to go through based off what I've been hearing. It's definitely going to go through. But I think it's all just how you're going to adapt. I think it's going to weed out a ton of agents in the area. I already know some that are freaking out, and it's like, hey, we're still getting compensated. It's okay.
Sell more houses, buy less.
Yeah, so I think like the strong agents will stay, and the strong agents will also still be advocates for their other co-agents out there to get that buyer's compensation. But I think it's going to weed out a ton of part-timers, casual realtors, which I think real estate's very expensive to be part-time in. But I think it's going to weed out a lot of people. I think it's going to freak people out, and I'm sure there's going to be stubborn sellers that are like, I'm not paying anybody. But I think their house will be really hard to sell. Yeah. So
be realtors going back into nursing and
So are there rules, and you may not know this, and if you don't, then that's fine, because I think, we may not know all the details about how this is all going to transpire, but is there a way, because I know there's a limit on how much you're allowed to ask for seller assist, right? is there going to be any sort of changes where you can ask for additional seller assist in order to come up with that? Maybe not a direct, like, hey, you're going to pay my agent, but are they going to increase the limits for the seller assist?
I don't know. I feel like that's a really good question. I would think just regardless, just with the world of inflation we're in, 6% sounds like a lot, but it doesn't go very far for these poor millennials that have so much student debt and they just can't get ahead ever. So I don't know. I'd be curious if like 6% became 9% seller's assist ever, but I don't know.
I mean, it's basically the same. You're just kind of doing an end around and paying the 3% anyway if you did that. But I just kind of wonder.
I think that's the hardship is, okay, you're going to go to a seller who, I don't know, lists their house at $300,000 and you're going to say, hey, I'm an unrepresented buyer, but I want a $9,000 discount because I don't have an agent. Like, I don't know. I think it just opens up a can of worms.
Yeah. And I've seen some people that have kind of, because there's all kinds of stuff on like TikTok and on social media and stuff. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on where people are like, well, if I don't use you as my agent, I'll just get a discount. And then they go and try to make this offer on their own. And then they go back and go, well, they're not going to give me a discount. Because why would the seller do that? If the seller was willing to give a discount, they would just pay your agent. I don't know. I just think it's very ill-conceived, and I don't think it's going to work out. But I think there's going to be ways to adapt. Like you said, I think that the agents that are, like you said, part-time, that are maybe just buyer's agents, that are just kind of reposting other people's listings and trying to represent buyers only, are going to end up looking for other lines of work.
So what's this whole, how does it shake out and play out for someone that's just selling property as an agent?
Just as a buyer's agent?
As a seller's agent on the other side.
Oh, well, I would hope that just as those seller's agents, that they always go for their listing appointment and really dive deep into the listing contract to really educate their sellers. I feel like they should be an advocate for how important a buyer agent is. I feel like most listing agents start out as like a buyer's agent. Everybody wants to be a listing agent. And I just feel like you have to be an advocate for the other party. And I just think saying, hey, I'll list your house, but we're not going to compensate the other side. I feel like deep down inside that it's not going to work.
Right.
I don't know.
That's why there is split commission.
Yes. And you need I feel like realtors are awesome facilitators. Your therapists, your hand holders, you do everything. And I would just be very curious with buyers who want to be unrepresented, what's your first step? Like, who's going to write your contract? What's your next step? Like, there's like a whole process. There's all these timelines. I don't know. I just think realtors are needed. Not that I'm going to like hardcore defend them. I mean, I know people do for sale by owner and they are perfectly fine, but I doubt that they're the first time home buyer. You need a little bit more hand holding throughout the process. When I bought my first house, I had no clue what title insurance was.
Right.
And you need title insurance. I would have had no clue. How do you get title insurance?
Well, and that's just it. So that's the next thing I was going to say. If nothing else, that fee is access to your network. Mm-hmm. How about like, okay, I'm going to buy this house. Well, you need a home inspection. Okay, well, who are you going to call? You have a list.
Yep.
Even lenders and appraisers and all the people that you need as a buyer to be able to close on a house that Joe Schmo doesn't have a Rolodex of vendors that do all that stuff.
Well, just to find a house. Yeah. Because that list, the MLS list, is so crucial because especially when things were going crazy, you needed to find them in advance. Yeah. You couldn't, it's not like 1984, you drive around and look for a for sale sign.
No.
I don't even know why they put those up.
The house that I flipped last year in Shaler never had a for sale sign in front of it.
Right.
And the lady that bought it, she was basically on, I don't know, Zillow or whatever she was using, but every morning was looking at houses in Shaler and looking at them. The day they went for sale, her agent had her in there. And he said they looked at, I don't remember, dozens of houses. And my house went on the market around noon. They were in it at 2:30, and I had an offer at 6:48.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a lockbox on the door. He called and wanted to look at it, and my dad was the listing agent. And he's like, yeah, but I don't even have a box on the door yet. And I'm like, give him the garage door code.
Right.
Like, let him in.
Yeah. So like the market gets smaller if you're just on the internet. If you're going to like Realtor.com. I mean, property I'm looking at to do now, we found it day one. like you said, like hours.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're not going to find it. You got it 9 to 5. You're not going to, even if you do go online and Google houses in Shaler, the real estate agent's going to bring you to the table first.
Listen, I'm on Zillow every single day looking for something to buy. It's hard out there.
Yeah. You need a buyer's agent.
It is. You need someone in your corner. I can't tell you how many times, because, you know, most people do work 9 to 5. How many times a house got listed in the morning, 10 a.m., I'm there doing a video walkthrough for my client because they want to see it and put an offer in right away.
Yeah.
And I just feel like...
And that goes to the trust, because they trust you that you're going to be like, walk away from this one.
Yeah.
You're not like, hey, we're not going to show you that room. We'll come and see that in person.
Like, oh, here's 30 wool acres. Let's walk away.
Yeah.
We're not going into the basement today.
Don't look at that.
Yeah.
And now a brief word from our sponsor.
This episode of Between Two Bridges is sponsored by Paymark Payroll. Are you tired of spending countless hours juggling payroll calculations, tax filings, and compliance regulations? Well, say goodbye to that chore and let Paymark Payroll take the burden off your shoulders. With our secure online portal, you can access your business information from any internet location, even your phone. Employees will love the ability to receive direct deposits, and they can access all their pay stubs, tax forms, and information through their own portal. Focus on growing your business while we take care of the rest. With top-notch customer support, we're always here to assist you with anything, at any time. Don't let payroll stress hold you back. Choose Paymark Payroll and experience the freedom to thrive. Contact us at payyourpeople.com for a personalized consultation and a demonstration of our powerful payroll solutions, and see how Paymark Payroll can better your workflow. That's payyourpeople.com. Join the growing list of satisfied businesses that have embraced the convenience and efficiency of Paymark. Payday made easy. Your business deserves nothing less than the best, and that's exactly what Paymark Payroll delivers. Now back to the show.
So Jerry's expert level, I'm novice level. Couldn't I just tell you I'm only paying you 1%?
As my buyer or my seller?
Yeah, buying. I'm looking to buy a house. Pam, I only want to pay you 1%.
See, this is where then I know my worth. Now, if you're $1 million client, you want 1%.
I'm going to call someone else then.
I'd probably say...
Isn't that the game they're trying to... Is that the game they're trying to play?
I'd say good luck trying to find somebody at 1%.
But it's all negotiable now.
It is all negotiable. But here's me negotiating with you.
Yeah.
I'd be like, how about 2.5?
How about that, Felicia? Well, yeah,
so
I guess
it's
you're asking...
normally 6. Now it's negotiable, right?
Are you my seller or my buyer?
I'm trying to buy a house.
What's
6.
your budget?
Okay.
You'd be half.
So it's 3.
And if you're my friend, you'd be less.
So 2.9.
and then she asked the question, what are you pre-approved for?
Yeah, and what's in your bank account?
You buying an $8 million house? I'll do 1%.
$2.
Yeah.
I think that's the hard thing, is like, I feel like it's going to be so awkward whenever you have to go back and forth. I work with all friends and family, so I hopefully don't see them screwing me.
Yeah.
But, although we already mentioned Kim. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I just feel like it does, like, it opens up a weird element when you first are meeting with, say, a stranger. Say you found me on my website, on Instagram or whatever. And I'm like, hey, so you want to see this house? Let's meet at my office first.
Okay.
Which, again, I feel like every good realtor should always do their homework on who in the world they're meeting. Never go in a vacant house alone with people.
Right.
The world's weird. But I feel like I feel like a little, like, you have to definitely prove your worth and show your worth to definitely say, like, hey, like, I'm worth like 3% out of the buyer. But I'd still say, like, I'm going to be the biggest advocate to try to get that seller to still compensate me. So I think there's like little workarounds with it.
Yeah, I think you're going to have your bottom feeders that are going to be like, I'll do it for a flat fee of, or a small amount. And yeah,
signs everywhere. We buy homes. We are we are the 1% agent.
And you're going to have your bottom feeders, but it's all going to be about value, and it's like that for any business. You know what I mean? And it's for the same reason that whenever somebody asks me what my hourly rate is, I hate telling them that because it's not equal. Just because the guy down the street is a lower hourly rate doesn't mean that he's going to get it done as well and as quickly as I will.
Yeah.
So it's not equal. Just because if you're at 3% and the guy down the street's at 1%, you're going to bring more value.
Yep.
Than they will.
The other thing I kind of took away from you guys talking about that. So if the barrier to entry is higher, would you expect prices to come down?
Barrier entry to what?
So we were talking numbers, right? The number went up roughly 10,000 to buy a house. So if I'm a first-time buyer, would you anticipate the whole market coming down because there's less people that could get that type of money?
I'm voting no, just because I feel like there's such a crazy house shortage. That was a tongue twister. Such a house shortage across like the country and even in this area. I mean, I listed a little $150,000 house and there was 33 showings in 24 hours.
Wow.
And you know how sad it is always being the agent calling saying like, I'm so sorry, we went with a different offer. You crush those people, and those people have been trying so hard. They're the ones writing you their sappy story. We've been looking for 11 months, 12 months, and we still haven't.
Do you actually read those? Or
I do.
You do?
And then I get people in their feels, and then
I'm guilty of it.
Then I always feel bad when you pick the wrong buyer.
So if you get 30 calls, do you take the first one, or like what is your process there?
So on this one, I guess I should say, like we had an offer probably within 2 hours of listing it, and it's like, come on, like I have so many showings, so I made them hold out, and then we got offers way superior to theirs, but. I always think you have to at least give it a little time, unless they totally give you your number or whatever you want or good terms. Because again, as a seller, you want the best terms.
Okay.
Less contingencies, the better.
So I don't think I talked about this in any episode because it was too fresh. But with mine, I got that offer right away, and it expired at midnight.
I hate that. I hate that.
I hated it.
Yes, you should have a time of the essence because technically the agreements are written out. They're good for 1 year, those offers. So there always should be a time of the essence, but 24 hours is so annoying.
It wasn't even 24 hours. It was 6.
Oh,
it was. I got it at 6:48. It was less. It was
that's just
less
such an
than 6
aggressive
hours.
buyer's agent.
It was
worth every penny of that 3% they got though, because they're in the house.
Oh, did you go with them?
So
but was
here's
it
the thing. It was full ask.
Oh.
It was full ask. 30-day close. They still had an inspection contingency, and it still had a finance contingency. So I had some serious thinking to do because my concern was, and I think you've seen this a lot, and I know I've seen it talking to clients, where buyers will come in and put an offer in, lock it up, and then try to beat you up on an inspection.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought there's a possibility she's going to try to beat me up on this inspection. Now, I knew that I replaced goddamn everything in that house. So there wasn't a whole lot that she could beat me up on. The appraisal kind of made me nervous because the house was above Etna. It was Shaler Township, but it was like right at the line. And it was in a cul-de-sac on a corner lot at the beginning of the cul-de-sac. And none of the houses had sold within the last 5 or 6 years, and none of them for anywhere near what I was asking. So I'm like, could this appraiser kind of screw me? So I was nervous about that. But I thought, if I don't take this offer and I end up with holding it for another month, now I got another month of hard money,
all that
utilities, all that stuff. And I looked at it like, this isn't my last one. It's not like it's my home and I have to maximize every dollar. It's just a flip that I'm going to do another one, hopefully soon. So I took it. But I still think back because I still think back and think I may have been able to squeeze a little bit more out of it because there was literally no time for anybody else to even see the house.
So did you have any other like showing requests for it? See, I feel like then that's different. So yeah, I also learned very early on, your first offer is usually your best offer.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
First offer is usually your best offer.
Well, good. Then you made me feel better. Yeah. But she did. She's in the house. And the inspection came back with like a couple little stupid things. We got it fixed. It was no problem. The biggest thing it cost me was whenever they let themselves in with the garage door opener, the garage door opener broke.
Stop. So wait, this is a funny story. Wait, was it broke because it was like shut from the inside?
No, I don't know. I don't think they did anything. I think that they were both locked. Original garage door openers from the house. It was built in 98 or something. We had been in and out of that house and in that garage door, that particular garage door, for 6 months, every day, multiple times a day. And when they left, the agent texted and said the garage door didn't go down all the way. It was up like this much. I'm like, that's not good. So I went over and it was stripped. The gears were all stripped. We had to replace the opener. I don't remember what it cost me, but it was more than everything else in the inspection. But I had to put a new garage door opener in it.
Pull that red knob and just let it slam.
So our second flip, we found it on market, and I felt like you walk houses, you've seen it all. Well, I wasn't paying attention that older ones lock. And I had no clue, and I clicked the button. I busted the whole garage door, so we had to buy it. Oh, no. We didn't have to buy it. We didn't have to buy it, but I was like, John, we have to buy this house. We just broke the garage door. Like, it snapped.
Yeah, because they have that
latch. I was mortified. I was like, who manually locks a garage door like that?
Yeah, especially with an opener.
Apparently, the older generation did.
Yeah, that's not what happened. That's not what happened here. But
I think I took my manual locks off of my garage because of that. Because, like, I have kids. They'll just hit the button for fun. Next thing you know, the motor's just...
I was mortified.
Torched.
I was mortified. That was within my first year of being an agent. And then this past summer, I broke somebody else's garage door. Oh, I hate garage doors. Those are always I'm always like, look with caution before you open it. Like, please.
Yeah.
Ugh. Especially the old wood
There's always those nice switches, too, where you can lock the button out. So if you manually lock it, you lock the button out. So options. There's options.
But it appraised. Everything came out. It worked out fine. And I'm happy everything worked out. But yeah, it's interesting. You don't know what to do. Like when you get that first offer, you're like, do I take it? What's the best way? And then when you have all those offers and you're looking at ones that are cash versus financing and
versus
FHA.
Conventional, 20% down. Who waived inspections?
Right.
Who's going to eat a part of the gap of an appraisal gap?
Right.
I've had a lot of appraisal issues.
I was Facebook searching people that put in offers on my house.
I know some of my sellers do that. Yeah. They look.
I lived next to my neighbors for a long time. They put up with a lot. I wanted to make sure they had someone nice,
and
quiet. Yeah, I mean, they lived with me in my early 20s next door to them, single. They put up with enough. So, like a prerequisite was a single homeowner with a cat.
How the appraisals, I found it kind of humorous. It seems like a lot in my experience that appraisers come in, and I hope that I don't piss off any appraisers, but the good ones are going to be pissed, but I don't mean you. Where they look at the purchase agreement and they're like, oh, $300, it's worth $305. It seems like there's so much of that. But how's the market obviously has changed with rates and stuff like that. So you said you're struggling with appraisals.
I've had a couple. One was a relatively big gap. I had like a $26,000 appraisal gap, which was super annoying to overcome. It was a multiple offer situation. 10 people went way over. And so I thought it was kind of frustrating because, like, to me, supply and demand showed like, hey, this is what 10 other people are valuing it at. Yeah, it was more than I listed it for, but I just felt like there should have been a little bit more value in that.
Now, the appraisal came in higher than your list price,
It still did, which was still a win for my seller, but it's also, if you're anticipating a whole lot more money, it's definitely a slap in the face with that one.
Yeah.
And then I've had a couple other ones that are still like, why? Like, why would you appraise it $4,000 under our list, like under our contract price? Like, just to add more of an annoyance to the whole process.
Right.
There's other things that buyers, if you're not represented, like, how are you going to overcome that? Like, so you have to be your own advocate then.
Have you been able to overcome them as an agent?
Yeah, I mean, like so a couple of all these have been on my listings. So, you say like, hey, can you meet me in the middle? No, the $26,000 one, we didn't meet in the middle. We tried our hardest, but like goofy $4,000 ones, hey, can you come out of pocket $2,000, I'll eat $2,000, things like that. Like, that's where you have a realtor having your best interest forward can help like facilitate it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
I feel like they shouldn't be allowed. They shouldn't be allowed to use the listing information at all towards the appraisal. Like it should be the numbers that they're supposed to compile. But I think like what you're saying, when people do that, they're taking the easy way out. Like probably never even went and looked at it, you know?
I think another frustrating thing with appraisals is they basically only pull off of the MLS. So if you know that a comp sold off market for basically where you're at, it's super frustrating because you don't exactly have proof except for just showing on the county website what it traded at basically, but there's no photos. So I think that's the other hard part.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of streets in this, especially in Allegheny County, there's a lot of dollar houses that were sold.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to just base it off the county's numbers,
yeah,
it's an analytically driven business. And if someone, like you said, if you have 10 offers at $450 for a $400,000 house, our whole lives we were told it's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's supply and demand.
Yeah.
And if the demand says that it's worth $450, then it's worth $450. If somebody's willing to pay for that. Now, I understand that banks are starting to hedge their, and I've seen on the lending side, the banks that we work with are protecting their money a whole lot more, especially on the commercial side. But I get that. But if you've got 10 offers that are all over what that appraisal was, then the appraisal's wrong.
And I think it's just frustrating because you're being I was trying to be an advocate for my seller. Like, hey, would you reconsider? Here's all these other offers that were basically the same price, and being dismissed and not even considering it's frustrating.
By the appraiser?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you ever been able to get an appraiser to change the appraisal?
I have. Not by a lot, but by still a couple thousand, which still helps. Sometimes, actually Cameron taught me this. You have to read the whole appraisal report. They miss things. They're not perfect. They'll miss a powder room. They'll have the square footage wrong. They'll miss a comparable that you might have used whenever you went to price out the home to list it. So I've definitely found success in not nitpicking their appraisals, but hey, you missed a powder room, or your square footage is off, or it's not laminate flooring, it's vinyl, or something like that. If you point it out, sometimes it does add value. So I also always think you have your client's best interest forward. Read those goofy reports.
Yeah. Another reason why you get 3%.
Mm-hmm.
What's the law when they do an appraisal? You have to be able to see the report, right? They can't just tell the bank the information and move on.
So for the most part, in my experience, sellers don't get the appraisal, which kind of stinks. The buyer always gets to review it. Now, when you have an appraisal gap, you ask, hey, can I see the appraisal? But I've never had an agent fight to give it to you, but sometimes they're a little bit more reserved. I don't know truly if that is just a buyer document.
Yeah, because you pay for it as the buyer.
Right. But I still think as the seller, you deserve to see what are they basing it off of, which is important.
Yeah, I think they gave it to me when I...
As the seller?
Yeah.
I feel on a lot of ours, I feel I've never seen them, but...
Well, if the deal goes south, you have to give it to them.
Yeah, I feel
a lot of every real estate I'm going off a basis of 4, but it says if you fail to close, then you're responsible for releasing all your all your reports go back to the seller.
So it's definitely interesting because I recently have a client under contract as a buyer. A buyer's under contract, and the house had fell through previously to somebody else. There was a home inspection report done. For the most part, us agents always just scribble out who the name of the previous buyer was, and you send it around if people ask for it. This agent wouldn't. We had to drive to their brokerage to actually see the the hard copy because the previous buyer refused for it to be passed around. So that was definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, I looked at some houses like that. They had the home inspection sitting right there, and now you're sitting in the house and you're like, well, let's go look at this foundation in the basement.
And I think for the most part, with inspections, at least, if they're done and you terminate or whatever, I feel it's the right for the seller to have it because we have such strict seller disclosure laws.
Right.
I feel you have to disclose that whole report.
Plus it's just a commonly good nature. It's already paid for. It's bought and paid for. It has no value to you. It has a ton of value to the seller. As a good human, just give it up.
You'd be surprised how many things would fall out within the same week and people still want their own inspection. It's those are $600 now. They're a little pricey. Why wouldn't you want to save your money and read somebody else's?
Yeah, but the appraisal end of it, maybe don't give it to them until after close. Because if it appraises for $100,000 more, the seller's going to be we're going to have to discuss some things. Like certainly when I bought my home, I like needed to close and I needed the seller of the home to never see that appraisal because we were in good shape.
That's
remember
great.
that?
Yeah.
We were like 150 above close. I mean, it was a unique deal, but like my fear was if they saw that and after all the work I put into the house, because like it was a rent to own to buy, felt like there could have been an ask. We don't want anybody asking for more money at close.
So can we shift gears a little bit? I want to ask your opinion on something else.
Oh boy.
Because you're unique in the fact that you're an investor, you're buying to flip, and you're an agent and you buy on and off market. So let's talk about wholesalers.
Ooh, fun subject.
So for anybody that doesn't know what a real estate wholesaler is, it's somebody that, and you can correct me if I mess this up, but I think I won't.
Confidence. I love it.
It's going for
So
it.
basically somebody that goes in, sometimes they represent themselves I think most of the time they represent themselves as the buyer to an off-market deal. And sometimes they're, going after estates. Sometimes it's family friends. Sometimes they're driving for dollars, whatever. Sometimes they have the bandit signs, the we buy houses with cash kind of deal. They meet with the owner. They get the house under contract for a certain price, say $50,000, and then they sell the contract. They turn around, they list it, they send it out in a mass email to investors in their network. Maybe they sell the contract for $60,000. And whenever the owner of the house goes to the closing table with the settlement company, there's a different guy at the other side of the table, and they're paying $60,000. The wholesaler made $10,000 in a spread, which, if you're doing your math, is more than 6%. And then the investor ends up buying the house. So as an investor, I've bought off of wholesalers, and I think that there's some out there that are legit and honest, and but it seems like in the last few years, there has been a lot of talk about regulating that side of the industry. So it came to a surprise to me whenever we're talking about changing licensed agents and how they're paid because they get paid too much, when wholesaling is wild, wild west. And I've seen wholesalers that are making $20,000 on a $30,000 house. And a real estate agent could never get away with that. So do you buy from wholesalers?
I do.
Yeah.
There's a few good ones.
There's a few good ones.
There's some bad ones.
There's some really bad ones.
There are some bad ones.
I see
to
some
avoid.
emails, Pam, and I'm like, I got some today, and I'm like, oh, that's not a bad price. And then I opened it up and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that house needs ripped down. There's no way to even, there's nothing about that house that's worth that money.
I think that's about like how, like I said, how flipping slowed down.
Yeah.
I feel like the good wholesalers, some of them have disappeared a little bit, which
Right?
is so frustrating.
The two that I've bought off of
I know, I want to like call them out. Like,
aren't doing
hello.
deals now.
Go for it. B2B, call them out. Send
It's
it.
like they're not doing any deals now, and I'm like, hey
And
guys,
it's so
like
frustrating.
I'm just getting shit.
I don't like that there's like a new brokerage in Pittsburgh that like wholesales.
Yeah.
I bought one off of them. It wasn't a horrible deal. It honestly wasn't a horrible deal. I was actually friends with the agent who started working with them. But my biggest annoyance was because it was a wholesale, on the backside when we sold our flip, we owed more in transfer tax. The person who was doing title for the buyer claimed that we owed more transfer tax on the wholesale fee. So we got screwed for a couple more $1,000s.
When you sold the house?
Mm-hmm. And me and John have probably bought 3 or 4 off of wholesalers, if I can remember correctly. And this one was the first time we've ever owed extra transfer tax based off of the wholesale fee from when it sold.
Not to call out the settlement company, but was it the one we usually deal with?
Nope.
Yeah. So I wonder if it was real.
Yeah. So it was definitely frustrating because, I mean, I don't know. Nobody wants to pay an unnecessary 1% on another, like, I think it was the wholesale fee was like $50,000 or something.
Yeah.
So we owed more. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was still stupid.
Yeah.
And I've just never seen it before.
Right.
I feel like wholesaling is a very weird fine line.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really know what you're doing. I've never tried to wholesale anything. I think, well, I'm an agent. I feel like that'd be so unethical. But
yeah, it's really weird to be able to say, because you're advertising yourself as an agent. And I've heard of people that are doing both, that are wholesaling and being an agent. And I agree. I don't understand how you can go talk to a seller but only selectively use your license. That you're restricted because as a listing agent, are you capped at 7%? Is there a cap to your commission?
I don't know. I've honestly never gone that high, but
well, yeah.
But I don't think so. I mean, really, everything's negotiable, so you could, I'm sure, go as high as you really wanted to. But then I feel like there really is a fine line in taking advantage of people.
Yeah.
And I think, like, when you see these wholesale fees.
Oh, that's crazy.
And it's so sad because for the most part, it is like an older person or, you know, somebody who had to move out of state and they don't know how to take care of this house anymore. I mean, during the peak of it, like, let's say like 2021 and 2022, wholesalers were literally cleaning house. They were making so much money. And I wonder if that's why they all disappeared. They probably owed their souls to the IRS.
Yeah, that's an expensive tax bill for some of them. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it seems like the good ones have all disappeared, and I know which brokerage you're talking about, and I looked at a property of theirs, and it was bad. It on paper it looked great, and I went and looked at it, and it had some major foundation issues that were probably not repairable. Like, it was bad.
I feel like I know what house you're talking about.
Yeah, we could talk off air.
Well, I think a lot of this, like, because I'm not a real estate investor, I'm doing some things, and I've done some things in real estate. I think a lot of this is, it's like, it becomes a game that's really hard to enter into. So, like, if you're a first-time home buyer and you think, I'm going to buy a house, I've saved up $40,000, I want to buy $190,000. It should be cut and dry for them, but it's not. So my fear is like, as we're having this conversation, is that's why the government wants to regulate it. But the problem is it's not going to help Mr. I want to be honest and buy a house. It's going to help the people in Bel Air that want to sell $9 million houses.
Yeah, I don't know who it's going to help, to be honest with you. And I think that I agree that the real estate world is kind of muddy, especially when you enter wholesalers into it, because there's some really shady ones out there that are completely misrepresenting, especially because the other side of that, like, so it's under contract and they have it under contract. They've represented themselves that they're going to buy it. They're going to pay cash. They're going to close. They do like a 60 or 90 day close. They drag it out as long as they can to give themselves as much time as possible to sell the contract, right? But what happens when they don't? So then they end up walking away from the deal, and
the good ones will buy it.
The good ones will buy it.
We buy any home.
But the shitty ones won't.
Yeah.
They walk away. And now that seller's like, well, what do you mean you're not going to buy my house now? Like, maybe they've already bought another house. Maybe they have a house that they're buying that they're contingent on selling their house or whatever. And, you're messing with people's livelihood. You're messing with people's, their lives.
So what's the benefit of selling your home to a wholesaler? You get rid of the seller commissions?
So the idea of the wholesaler is that a lot of people, when they're like an older person, that the house is rough.
Cash now.
It's not ready for the MLS, right? It's not lendable. So it's an investor deal. Okay. So a wholesaler is going to come in and to the seller, they think they're dealing with an investor. They think that guy's a cash buyer. He's an investor. He's going to fix up my house. He doesn't have to, because if a house is really bad, a bank won't lend on it. So these people look at that like, this is the guy that's going to be able to just give me cash for this. I don't have to worry about fixing anything because this is not lendable, this house, the way it's at. Or it's grandma's house that's fucking trashed and she's a hoarder and it's full of crap. And what am I supposed to do? I can't hire Pam. She's not going to list this. What's she going to take pictures of? Grandma's shit. So this wholesaler comes in and he's like, I'll give you 20,000 cash. And they're like, oh, great.
It's so
they
funny.
Don't realize that he just listed it on Facebook for 50.
Yeah. And you think about that, like in my position at Oakmont, like when you live in a house for 34 years, it has like sentimental value to you, but it has no real financial value. So like when we would talk, like, and if you're not alive at the wheel, I'm like, all right, I'm done with this house. I'm done paying the taxes on this house. I'm going to call We Buy Any Home. They're going to give me $62,000.
Exactly.
And then they go to the market with it. They sell it for $162,000. And you're like, I just left $100,000 on the table.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
now I
that's
understand.
That's the idea
Proceed
of a
with the
wholesaler.
chlorophyll.
And as an investor, these are the guys that are, as an investor for me, like I've never really done the cash for dollars thing. I don't do the bandit sign. So I find it incredibly uncomfortable to kind of chase estates and approach people that have had recent deaths in the family. Those are the people that are kind of doing that dirty work, right? They're the ones that are reaching out to the family that grandma just died and saying, hey, what are you going to do with the house?
They're obituary chasers.
Exactly. And to some investors, I don't want to do it. And I would rather pay a $5,000 or $10,000 wholesale fee or something more, whatever, if it warrants it. I've paid more. But so there's a purpose for them, but some of them are real shady.
Some of them ruin our industry. They're the ones that give investors, I guess I should say, a bad name.
Yeah.
There's also bad flippers.
There's a lot of bad flippers.
There's a lot of bad ones.
So yeah, I have a family member that sold a house to a really bad flipper. And there were some things in the attic. They were already working on the house, but there were some things in the attic. And like they had all the outlet covers off and they just painted over all the outlets.
Oh, I can't stand that. That's a pet peeve. That and when you paint light switches. Like, come on.
They took the cover plates off. They were nice.
I don't even like when they paint around the light switches. Like, take the screws out, bro.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's 2 screws, man. Take it out and paint around the hole and then put the back.
Yeah.
It's 98 cents for a new cover plate. Yeah. Why are you painting it? Yeah. You just put a new one on.
Yeah.
So and then that's the problem too, because then you kind of get people, first-time home buyers, oh, I can afford this house. And then they get in there and it's like all the plaster's cracking and
it's new and it's pretty because they new floor and new paint.
Right.
Like,
it's all brand 12 new. Months. Yeah.
And it's junk.
When we did my house, it was like we updated, I did a ton of the work, 90% of all the work myself. And one of my favorite things is like we redid all the plumbing 3/4 inch, new furnace, new hot water heater. Like you feel comfortable going to bed at night. But when someone flips a house, you're like, the furnace looks new. Well, they spit shined it, Yeah. So.
Yeah. When I only flipped one house. When I did it, I went overboard on a lot.
Took the Cam approach.
I did. Well, and I actually flat out told Cam, hey, that house in Brackenridge, he's like, yeah. I said, I am completely stealing that design. That was freaking awesome. He's like, that's cool. Call Bree. She'll tell you all about it. So I basically stole his design for that house and it sold really fast. So thanks, bud. Thanks, Bree. But I went overboard. But my whole thing was that I bought it right. I knew it was going to make me money. It did. But I wanted to be able to sleep at night. You know what I mean?
You have to do it right. Yeah. I don't know.
I didn't want to have to worry that this person's buying this house and it's going to be that they're going to have serious problems. And,
Yeah, and you're in a unique position too because Landmark's still going to be there. So you flip a house is shit.
Yeah,
She's
it's not
bashing you on the internet for your tax agency.
Yeah,
you're a realtor. You're in the game. You're not going anywhere. Some of these guys are in and out.
Yeah, we have public personas. Like they can find us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. She's probably watching this podcast.
We hope she's listener number 11.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was right.
Yeah. So you're still flipping houses, right? Mm-hmm. You working on anything now?
We just have 2 listed. Well, one's listed, one's under contract. Still just trying to find our next one. But we've also I also don't want to take up all your time, but we've dove into multifamily. So my husband is a joint venture partner on an 88 unit in Indiana, and we're passive investors on a 64 unit in Cleveland. So we also have other just little gigs too. But I guess we don't sweat that we don't have a house.
I've recently learned that there's a program that if you're like an investor or if you sold, like say you're selling, your grandfather had a commercial property and you're selling it for $3 million. Well, you don't want to take the hit on $3 million. So you're able to buy into these multi units and divert some of the tax. Like you don't have to own the whole building. So if there's a 330 unit apartment building in Boulder, Colorado, you can convert
1031 exchange.
There you go. That's the number I was looking for. Yeah, he was telling me all about it. It was kind of cool because like it helps pay for some of these projects and helps alleviate some of the tax burden. So,
where'd you meet John?
High school.
Oh, okay.
High school sweethearts.
I met him in the T hallway. If anybody knows where that was, in Penn Hills.
The Turner T hallway.
The T hallway in the Penn Hills High School.
I met him
my first day of my. Okay. I met him my first day of my sophomore year. He's 2 years older than me.
Okay.
He was his locker was right next to one of my best friends.
Oh.
Yeah, so she introduced me because in Penn Hills 10th grade you hit the high school. So I didn't know him. He went to Catholic school growing up.
Okay. A little bit about Madison. I see she turned 1 in October. Give us the...
Yeah, she's almost 18 months. She's a little personality.
The birth story. Where were you when the water broke?
So I was induced.
This took a weird turn.
I was induced, actually.
Get to know the lady.
I had high blood pressure, so I had to be induced. And she was just the best. I had her at McGee.
Yeah.
I loved
the best.
I loved my experience at McGee. I get so mad when people are like, you had your baby at a baby making factory.
Good.
So what? If something went wrong, I was at the right place.
I don't buy my car from a cabinet maker. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So I loved McGee. I had a great experience there. Oh, yeah. I love talking about my birth story. This would be weird for you guys, though, but it was so fun.
Before you go on a rant, one of the things that we do here is we always kind of like timestamp life in these episodes. So like what we're doing, where we're at. So
hey, that's
your daughter will be able to see this.
Did you keep working the entire time? Did you take some time away to raise her?
So I actually took my laptop with me into the hospital. I had a closing the day I had her.
These Penn Hills girls, they're built different.
That's the other thing, I guess, about Penn Hills. But about being a realtor, it never stops.
Yeah.
Or being a mom or a woman.
Correct. There's no off button. But dad did bedtime tonight, so that's good. Yeah. But I feel like as another caveat of what like realtors do, I gave myself 10 days as a maternity leave. Wow. Like, I mean, I took her everywhere with me. Ask any of my clients. Madison was there with me. She's my little tax write-off. But I mean, again, like, when you have something pop up and you can't show one of your buyers a house, like you pay another agent to go do it for you. So I don't think people realize, like, I pay other agents $50 a house to go show houses for me. You're showing 3 houses for me. I'm Venmoing you $150 to help me out.
Comes off that 3%.
Because nobody understands that, like, you're not getting paid. If somebody's helping you, that's not their client. So you gotta compensate.
Not easy being a woman. We've set her on 4 out of the 22.
No. Madison's not on payroll.
Not yet.
Not yet.
She needs to be a little bigger.
Yeah.
A little older.
Yeah.
Actually useful.
I can just see a 16-year-old girl just showing up, showing houses for $50.
Right.
And by the time she's 16, it'll be $175.
Right. Inflation will crush me.
I learned a lot. I got 15 tabs open I got to go read about. So, Jerry, anything else?
No. So, somebody wants to sell a house and they want Pam Potts to list it. Where do they go?
You can go to pampottsrealtor.com, or you can find me on like any social media. It's just my name basically everywhere. But they can find me there. Or ask any of these gentlemen to connect you with me.
I will do that.
And I'm going to leave you with this. I think we've had quite a few different business owners on here. And a funeral director seems like it's an easy job. Not an easy job. Real estate agent, it's not an easy job. Mm-hmm. Like it's not all TV. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks, Pam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Between Two Bridges, a business-to-business podcast. Find and follow us on your preferred podcast streaming platform. Like and subscribe, and leave us a rating and review. You can join us socially on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Yes, we still call it Twitter. You can email the show at info@betweentwobridgespodcast.com. Until next time, make it till you rake it.